This is Clive Fitness in the Early Music Studio Workshop. I'm going to talk briefly today about the use of this type of nail. This is known sometimes as a rose head nail or also a Roman nail. And this is the kind of iron work that was used at one time to put lutes together. If you look at old radiographs from the 50s and 60s, you'll see these kind of nails are clearly seen in the x-rays, and they were used to join the block and the neck together. And this is a very important operation in lute making. For many years I used to use these kind of 3-inch screws. I'm Canadian, so I use these Robertson screws, which are hardened steel. But I did find that there were a couple of problems with this. One is that these, though they're hard, they are somewhat flexible. And the other problem I found was that even using two of them, sometimes the joint, when you introduce glue into it, it tends to sort of slide forward. And all the work you did fitting the neck to the body can be undone in a moment. You have to take it all apart and clean it all up. And so this was a problem. And I did read somewhere an English lute maker talking about the use of these old-style nails, and that they had certain advantages. And you can certainly see that. This is quite a bit at the same length. The same piece of steel here is considerably thicker and more rigid than about here, you can say, than the iron. So I'm going to take it over here, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Here's the lute. And I got this all ready for making the neck joint. You can see that once this is introduced into the block here, the amount that it's going to penetrate into the neck is really quite substantial. And that's much more rigid than a screw would be. So that's one advantage. The other advantage is that I have found that rigidity means that when I join the neck and body together when I put glue on this butt joint here, even though I have these in place, these things that prevent it from riding up, they're really not necessary. Once this is introduced and hammered home all the way, it's incredibly rigid, and it just doesn't move. So I think this makes the lute considerably more resistant to shock. So here I have the soundboard, all prepared. It's all barred. I put a bit of finish on it. I did that in another video. You might have seen that, about using cyanoacrylic glue. This is the finished product. I've now glued the bridge exactly in the center of the soundboard. You can see that. And to go over here to the drawing, you can see in this drawing that here's the neck and here's the body. You can see that the center line of the neck and the center line of the body don't actually line up. And that's because the bridge has to be in the center. And for that to happen, the neck actually has to be canted over this way. This is a feature of Baroque instruments of the 17th century, and it's always a problem to get the neck to be fitted to the body in such a way that it results in exactly the kind of action and body that we want. So here I have the neck block that I intend to use. This is the blank here, and I have worked this joint here. I've actually used a bandsaw to saw this initially, and then I have another piece of wood here, which is actually an offcut from a previous lute. And this describes the exact angle that I'm after. So you can see if I use that's the angle that I want. And I took that angle from, it's the complementary angle to the one on the body. And this makes it very easy for me to simply take a plane and remove material here and get this exactly right, so that on the lute body over here, there's a little bit of action. So that means that the neck has got just a slight angle up to it, and that it gives me about a millimeter or two of action. If this is not there, the lute will not play well. So this is a factor to consider when we fit the neck and body together. So before I drill the hole in the neck block, right here, I've marked that point here. And I've also marked it back here. Now what I'll do is drill the hole from this side about halfway through, and then I'll drill the hole from this side halfway through. And I have this on a kind of sling on a vise so that it's all level. So then I'll use just a hand drill and an electric hand drill, and that has a level in the handle, so that I can easily tell that I'm going at a perfect right angle. It's never been a problem before. So this is how the neck is going to be fitted. What we have done here is, after I've planed this surface, I planed this surface down so that it's slightly undercut, and then when I took it off the mold, and that joint is considered to be, I would say, inviolable. I don't want to change this, although I have done in the past. And then I have attached these two little wooden studs here in these holes are the same holes that were used to attach the whole lute body and the block to the mold. So it's not like I'm introducing anything new there, and they're not glued down or anything. I can easily and quickly remove them. They're only short little screws about this long. So then I've planed this surface of the blank so that it has a slightly smaller angle. And then when I make them together, I can quickly see, as soon as I press that joint, that I've got a couple of millimeters of action there. And that's what I want. I want this to be so that the highest point is about here somewhere. This is slightly longer than the complete length of the neck. And the block is much larger than the neck I need. Because I like to work with a larger piece of wood, because you never know when you're going to have to cut some off and start over again. So, so then you can see that if I press that joint closed, and I can see from the underside down here that the joint is indeed very well and securely made. And eventually I will mark the profile of the lute body against the down here underneath. I will take a pencil and mark that, and then I'll draw the profile of the neck I want at this end, and then I will just simply join it and remove all of the unnecessary material using various tools. That's not really why I'm here today. I'm trying to show how the neck and body are fitted together with this nail. So after I've done that, I'll be drilling this hole, and then I'll use an awl and make a mark in the end block here and drill a hole exactly where I want it. So before I start drilling the hole, I've made sure that the lute the body is completely level, the jig is level. I've leveled this cradle that I hold the lute in, and the blank is also level. And I've got about 2 millimeters of action right here. I just thought I'd say a word about the actual material from which this block is alder. I like alder because it's a very nice wood. It doesn't split easily. It's very light, and it has kind of a medium density. It's not maple. I stopped using maple for blocks because it's just too hard, and actually it splits fairly easily. This piece of wood is basswood or basswood, and it's an eastern U.S. Riparian wood. That means it comes from a river system. It's like poplar, lime. Alder is also one of these woods. This is a coastal wood in British Columbia, here where I live. And it's readily available and not very expensive. This wood this basswood is very good material for a neck because it's so stable, and it's kind of lightweight. I used to use other woods that I thought were a bit too dense and therefore made the neck a little too heavy. Since this is going to be a theorbo, it's very important that this part of the lute be really as light as possible, and as well as the extension, which is going to come off here and make the peg box. It doesn't really matter with the Baroque lute, with the bent back peg box goes like this, but those long extended peg boxes, obviously this material is more crucial. One of the principal properties that alder has is that it's very workable. I'll easily be able to drill this hole and then mark it onto the block here with the awl right against this surface here. I'll just put an awl through here and then mark it there. And I'll drill a hole, and then I'll be back in a minute. So here I've drilled my hole from this side. I used a little pilot hole first, and then I enlarged it to 3/16. And then here I have the hole drilled from this side to the same size. Now I've got these two little studs on there, and you can see this makes it really very easy. All I have to do is let this sit here, and it's so stable and so well fitted that it will actually just sit there all by itself. So I just hold that securely. I'm approximately making sure that there's approximately the same amount of material here on either side. And doing this with one hand, of course, because I'm holding the camera with the other. And I'll take my awl, which is the 3/16 shaft, and I'll put that in there, and then I will simply take my mallet and until I feel it's going through. So then I can easily lift that off and see that it has indeed projected through the hole. And I now have the mark for my blank where I want it to be, right on my neck blank. So, very accurate, no problems. So in essence we're going to fit the nail, always with the same attitude, so in the same place, and it's just going to fit in here like this. And in order to get that hole shaped more or less the same, although it will be round, as the nail, we're going to use the very same tool that we use to fit the pegs of the lute, a reamer. So the reamer goes in the hole, and we just start working like that, and trial and error fitting until the nail is about this far from being fitted. And then at that point we will then use a chisel and mortise the corners so that it's square, and keep fitting it until it has gone in this far. And then we'll fit the bottom part of the nail in the blank. The reamer has now come to the end of it's now about as deeply into the hole as we can possibly get it. And this is where the nail progress has come to. We've got it about, always have to have it in the same orientation. It was like that. So you can see we've got about a few centimeters to go until we get to the sort of the collar of it. And so we're now going to switch to a slightly larger reamer. So this is a quite a bit larger reamer. It's the reamer I use for fitting guitar pegs, which are usually the maximum diameter on this one is about 7 millimeters, and the maximum diameter on this one is about 10 millimeters. So it's not really that much larger, and you can see by testing all the time that we're now a little farther ahead. At this point I will switch to a chisel and start to make this the sides of this whole square using a very small chisel. So you can see this is just a 1/4 inch, a normal, it's a very old chisel, and it's just about the right size at the collar of the nail. These nails are made by, they're just really a piece, just like an ingot is essentially driven into a shaped hole in the anvil by the farrier. This is where I got this from, a guy who normally makes horseshoes and deals with horses. And you know, I paid, I think I was, they're kind of $10–12 a piece. I got a bunch of them. Anyway, so what I've done is simply taken the chisel and try to get it aligned. It's hard to do this with one hand, but especially my left hand. But and you just sort of go at it like that, and you try to make the hole a bit square, and you keep testing for fit as you're moving along, just fitting it in like that, and you can see we're not too far from the end. A little bit more fitting. We might also use a file once in a while, like a triangular file, to just get the thing cleared. It's also possible to fit the nail by actually filing the end here. I like to just file the corners off a little bit and square it up a little and make it fit really as tightly as I can. And when I've done that, I'll be back. As the nail is closer and closer to being fitted, then it becomes not a bad idea, rather than removing wood anymore, which becomes more difficult, it's better to just file the shoulders a little of the nail and make the nail a little bit smaller and maybe a little square, a little more square, a little smoother, because these nails are kind of rough and they aren't by any means terribly square. That's not a problem. That actually helps, because their roughness helps them to produce friction inside the hole, and that's what holds the whole thing together. And it really improves the lute's resistance to shock. So now I've got the nail fitted within about a centimeter, I'd say, of being completely flush with the edge of the block here. I don't want to go much farther than that. And so what I will try to do now is, because the projection on this nail has now gotten, I'm deeply into the, what would be, if you imagined the neck blank around that. What I'll do now is I'll start working on the neck blank and making it fit. And so we kind of bring them both together. That seems to be, to me, the best option rather than fitting this completely all at once. I want to have a little bit of room to knock this in at the end, because that's what's going to make the tight friction fit that I'm after to get the greatest possible clamping pressure between the face of this joint and the face of the neck joint. So this is really the object of this exercise here, it's essentially using the nail as a clamp. So now I think you can see what we're after here. The nail is fitted in the hole, and it's also penetrated into the block, very, about down to here, something like that. So you can begin to understand that the end of this process is just making that the hole in the neck a little bit wider. Now, because this block is end grain and this block is side grain, if I too aggressively hammer this, it could split. So I don't want that. And on the other hand, we want the hole to fit carefully in here, but this is end grain, and it's like the straws. It's like a bunch of straws kind of separating like that. The fibers just basically separate. There's not much resistance. The wood is kind of low density. That's one reason why we don't use something like maple or a harder wood for the neck, because it just wouldn't lend itself to this process. On the other hand, don't use soft wood, it will split. So we have to pick the materials carefully to work this process really well. So when I've finished the fitting, I'll come back. So the nail is almost right to the bottom of the hole in both the block and in the neck. And now if we check around here where the joint is, we can see there's a little bit of space underneath the joint at the top here. So we want to close that up. So we'll do that by removing material from this area here, just by simply planing this block, removing the nail and working until the fitting of the three pieces, that is the nail, the block, and the neck piece, has completely closed up, and it's the right angle and the right amount of tension and friction. So I'll work on this with a block plane until I'm confident that the joint is completely closed here. It's just very, very small amount of space there. But I'll just take off really what I call feathers, very, very fine shavings, just from about here upwards until this angle is a little bit more relieved. And that also brings the neck a little bit in relief it brings it up this way. So that's actually good, because we can plane material off here. We don't want this to be negative. We want it to be positive. So that's all in the nature of the operation itself. And it's one of the reasons why this works well, I think, is just that you can work at it slowly, and just by taking off small amounts of material, the fitting gets better and better. Well, as I'm working at this block here, I noticed that this material here, the neck is eventually going to take this profile approximately, and what I would like to do is I will start to remove material from this area. I won't go off the ends here, because I want the joint to be closed around the area where the neck and body join, and I don't mind a little bit of space in here, because the glue will fill that, and a little bit of gap is fine. High glue will fill a gap very well. So to get the best possible joint, it's important to just remove material from the top part of the joint and nowhere else. So that takes a bit of skill and some trial and error fitting. So now the nail is almost completely in. The joint is really almost completely closed up, and I've got about, you can see I've got maybe about right here, I've got about 3 millimeters of action. That is to say that there's a slight dip here. This is easily remedied at a later stage by simply planing material off this end of the neck, and it's actually desirable. It's much better than planing material from the bowl or from the block. We don't want to remove any of this material. We would far prefer to move this material. So actually this is a positive development. And the fitting, now we've fitted the nail this block together, and we have a good reading on the action. So now it's time to, we can take these studs away, these little studs, unscrew those, and now the thing is sufficiently joined. We can take the soundboard, fit it on, draw the correct profile of the neck as we would like it to be, and then go ahead and make the joint after the neck has been planed down into its final contour and veneered, and then we'll simply glue it on, and that's the whole process.